Good afternoon, this is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Show. The Right Show is a podcast about all things strange and unusual, especially in reference to a death. And tonight we're going to talk about the death of Julie Barnkyock. It's a cold case. I don't think I've ever done an episode yet where they didn't know the killer. I'm trying to think. You know, outside of the strange ones like Pipus. Well, Marilyn, there's debate, but this one is truly a cold case. I wanted to do a shout out to my man, Murder at Bedtime with Lyndon, podcast and YouTube, Murder at Bedtime with Lyndon. So good. He does these really unusual stories. They're fascinating. They truly are. Check it out. I guarantee you wouldn't be disappointed. Very good. If you're into true crime, there's just no doubt you would like it. Old school crime. Really bizarre. That's Murder at Bedtime with Lyndon. Also, of course, Grizzly Books. That's Grizzly_books. It's a podcast. It's an Instagram. She has lots of books that you can purchase on Amazon, or I think she has audiobooks now. Ted Bundy and the Milwaukee... can I never remember his name? Jeffrey Dahmer. I can picture his face. I can never think of his name. She knows I am the hugest fan. I like both of them, but the Ted Bundy one is just... I'm fascinated by Ted Bundy and how he was able to maintain such this image of this well put together guy, and yet he was sick. She really digs deep into a lot of what I never heard about Bundy before. Also, True Crime Bones. That's Marissa Bones. She also has a podcast that's fantastic. Also, it's a little different, but it's really good. If you're into... I know poetry is not the first thing. Poetry is often a forgotten art. I have to admit, I am normal poetry that's bland or whatnot, I don't go for. But Carolyn Kingan's, her book, it's a book of poetry. We're going to put the names in a basket. Before the Big Bang Makes a Sound. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Great book. So DM me on Instagram, shopaholicdeb44, or email me at my website, therightshoepodcast.com. Just say you want to be put into the poetry contest, and I'll drop it right in. Also, thank you for listening and all your kind words. I truly mean that. I've been really getting excellent feedback about the Mayhem episode in particular. I have to add, I'm sorry, there's a lot of ads today, but they're all for your benefit as well as my own. Attila Chihara from Mayhem has Saturnus, like the planet, SaturnUsProductions.com. Go on there for all things Mayhem. Okay, I don't want to take too much time up with the ads. I know I'm the same way. I like to get to the meat and potatoes. This story tonight is Julie Barnkyock, and I have to say before somebody had suggested it, I had never heard of Julie Barnkyock. The name was peculiar, and I thought, wow. But when I read it, it's, what a case. So here we go. Let's get started, guys. That is all the business, but that's half the fun. And it's quiet tonight. I'm loving it. So let's move forth. Now, this case was brought to me by, I never know who wants to say their name. I should have just asked. Regardless, I'll call her S, as in Susan. She had written to me and asked if I would do this case. You learn so much when you investigate cases. When you go through these cases, I'm telling you, I can see how investigators bring stuff home with them, because you really do start to, like me, I'll give you a hint, because of all that I read all the time, and it does start getting to you. I mean, you start getting like a little goofy is there any good in the world? And especially with everything else going on, COVID and every, it stinks that we're so isolated now. And, it causes a lot of anxiety. So my friend had said, will you look up the case of Julie Barnkyock? And also what she said to me was, when this happened, and this happened in 93, and she's a little younger than me. So when this happened, she was just getting out of high school. Now, I had told a story about Tina Severance, number 2 on my cases, and she had been murdered by this guy named Albert Altamore. The story is number 2, but I'll go briefly. She was a friend. My sister was best friends with her twin, and we were all friends in that neighborhood, and she came over my house. I remember her walking through my basement. I can remember it sitting here like it was yesterday. It scares me thinking of that. I remember oh God, it freaks me out. She opened the door to the backyard, and then like a week later, my mom was in my bedroom saying, Debbie, wake up. Tina's missing. And I said, Mom, she's probably out partying. I never, in my wildest imagination, I never thought what happened would happen. It's hard to think about, to be honest, but the point is that I remember that feeling, and I was a junior in high school. Now, the girl who had wrote to me, S, said, she felt the same way. She said when it happened, they were all scared to death. And what happened is very scary. Julie Barnkyock was a nice girl. And, she was like one of those girls that was idealistic, that would bring Halloween candy to the homeless, everyone's friend. It seemed like she really had a good heart in being so sweet and nice. There was maybe a little naivete about her, because what happened was one night she had some friends down on South Street, Brian Todd, who was homeless at the time, but she was going to meet him, and she, like, as I said, that didn't matter to her. That was her friend, and she was hanging out with him. Now, she came back on the R5 which is one of the stops is Lansdale, which is Montgomery County. Now, her family, Gloria and Joseph Barnkyock, they all lived in New Britain, and she had just graduated from Central Bucks. It's called CB West High School. There's a couple of them, but this was CB West. So she was coming back on the R5. She calls her parents, and her mom said she sounded nervous. Now, a mother always knows. So if she said she sounded nervous, something was up, even when she called. She was telling her dad that she needed a ride, but she barely got the words out, and the phone was slammed down. So her dad drove to the train station, and it's right on the border of Bucks County and Montgomery County. So, with the train station being in Montgomery County. So that probably, I bet you that caused a little bit of issue, when she was first reported as missing. Something happened that I read, and it's very peculiar. The dad, so Julia calls her father. The phone is said to be slammed down. Now, he goes to the Lansdale train station to pick her up. They question why he waited so long, why the family waited so long, because they said 18 hours went by before she was reported missing. Now, the family said, Gloria in particular was in a newspaper as saying, the Morning Call, I believe it was, that Joseph thought he saw her get into a car with somebody else, with one of her friends. So, but that is so peculiar to me, because if I went to a train station to pick up my daughter and it was late out and I saw her get into a car with friends, now I know there was no cell phones back then, but knowing me, I would have went after the car just to make sure that she was in that car. So that to me is a curious thing, that he thought he saw her get into a car with friends and that didn't alarm him after the phone was slammed down. But trust me, I am in no way at all saying the family did anything wrong, because they probably thought everything was fine. And this is all in retrospect and hindsight. It just struck me as peculiar that when she said that, I was like, wow, that is weird. Why? I just found it peculiar. But it means nothing, because it's just an unfortunate thing where you probably do question yourself 1,000 times. Why didn't I make sure? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? When he came to the train station 20 minutes later, regardless of if he thought he saw her get into a car or not, he couldn't find her. So he went home, and then the next morning she still wasn't home. So that's when they called the police, and then they started getting worried. Even right off the top of the bat, the mom, Gloria, had an uneasy feeling that something was wrong. There was a guy, Brian Todd, who was homeless at the time, and he was her friend. But I get the impression that the mom never particularly cared for him. And that's just a gut feeling, because she never really says anything until he says something peculiar that I'll get to. It seems like Brian Todd was friends with benefits, I guess you would call it nowadays. Back then it wasn't quite the saying yet. The problem is that she was gone. I mean, they didn't know where she was, and some time passed before she was to be found. So she's missing. 3 weeks go by. Now the last time she was seen alive was November 8th, 1993. She was found, unfortunately, by a homeless person on December 2nd, 1993, in a SEPTA, which is a Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. It is what Philly and the surrounding area of Philadelphia use as the transportation system. In one of the train yards, they found her decomposing body. Now, it was cold out that year, but she was there, nude from the waist down. She was decomposed enough that they really couldn't gather any evidence, and that's a big problem with this case. I get the impression that they never collected. It seems that she was sexually assaulted, but they could never collect any DNA evidence or anything like that. Now, when I asked some of her friends if there's anything they can remember, back then they weren't sure if the body was kept somewhere and then later put at this train station. It seems odd that all of a sudden maybe it was kept somewhere and then put at the train station. I'm not sure. Nobody is sure. And it gave people nightmares for weeks. Everyone that knew of her, went to school with her, said the same thing, that it just terrified everybody. And they were very scared. Like, what happened to Julie? How could this happen? New Britain is a nice neighborhood. It's not an area where a lot of murders happen at all. It's not that far outside of Philadelphia, the Lansdale train station, but it's miles away from, for example, this year we're hitting 500 murders in Philadelphia. The homicide unit is slamming busy. But especially in the 90s, I lived for a brief time on the border of Montgomery and Bucks, just as this train station / where her parents lived. New Britain was on the Bucks County side. Montgomery was where the train station was, but it was right there. When I lived in this we rented a house, 611 and County Line Road that's the thing. Back then, it was still phone books. You had a phone number, and when I called the phone company to get my phone turned on, they said, do you want to be listed as Hatboro or Horsham, Montgomery or Bucks? And I said I would rather be considered Bucks, Hatboro. There was several reasons for that. That's how close the counties are. You are right on the line. So they found her in the train yard, and she was beat her. What had killed her was ultimately blunt force trauma to the head. She had been beaten so badly in the face that it was beyond recognition. Now, as a parent, I cannot imagine the feeling of knowing this is how your child died. There is still a $10,000 reward to this day. And I will give the number right now. Also, I will write the number in therightshoepodcast.com. It's the detectives for this particular case. The area code is 610-278-3368. That's 610-278-3368. And if you know any information, you never know. There's still a $10,000 reward, or just out of the kindness of your heart, if you know anything. If you're still alive and maybe you've done this horrible crime because the person's out there somewhere, that person was never caught. That family has no closure. That has got to be absolute torture. I mean, so this family needs closure. Tina Severance, it's horrible that we even know who he is, and I can't even say his name. I just gotta hate the guy so much. The family had closure, even if it still destroys families. Nothing good ever comes out of that. It's a nightmare. But to have closure, I'm sure this family still wants closure regardless. So they found her beaten to death in a train yard with no pants on, and she was beaten so badly she was unrecognizable. I think perhaps they used dental records maybe and I'm sure just maybe the clothes she was wearing. They identified her as Julie Barnkyock. It was a mystery, and there was 3 total suspects. Now, the 3 suspects, one was Brian Todd, and that was her so-called homeless friend. I think back then he was homeless, and it seems from the articles I read that he got himself together a little better, so he's not homeless in today. I'll go through the suspects, and then I'll go through each one. Brian Todd, he was in his 20s at the time of her death. And he was her boyfriend / friends with benefits, the only way I can say it, because there was some sort of possible romantic relationship, but they were never able to totally corroborate that. So they weren't sure of their exact relationship. But that's who she was visiting the night that she went to South Street. Scott Hutchins, who at the time was 26. He's in jail now, still, and we'll get to what his story was. And then Arthur Bomar, who was the one who was given the death sentence for Amy Willard. She was a lacrosse player, and one night her car was found. She was at a bar called Smokey Joe's Tavern one night in Wayne, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia. She was from Philly. She was going to school, a student at George Mason University, where she was ranked in the top 25 female lacrosse players in the country. It wasn't just our area, it was in the country. So she came home, she had 3 beers, and then they said she was there for 3 hours, and she drank less than 1 beer, and she left. Friends would say she left the bar between 1:30 and 1:40, and only a short time later, at 2 o'clock, an off-duty paramedic spotted her car. This story is fascinating. The car was found running with the headlights on, the radio playing, and the driver's side door open. And it was abandoned on Interstate 46. It was like a transition road between 46 and Route 1. But there was no sign of Amy. There was a little blood found, and they realized something horrible had happened. A short time later, I think it was later that day, Amy's naked body was found in a vacant lot of North Philadelphia, 16th and Indiana, by a group of children playing. Her clothing had never been found. She had been raped, and blunt force trauma is what had killed her. just like Julie. How they found, now Arthur Bomar was the guy who did this, but how they found Arthur Bomar was interesting. I'll just say that real quick. He had done this to a couple people, and in fact, they figured that he was the killer of Maria Cabuenos. She had disappeared 3 months before his arrest, and she was also on Route 476, where they found blood, and their bumpers had been scraped. So this is what Hallie probably got Amy, because ultimately how he was caught was he was driving behind. They didn't give the victim's name, but he was driving behind a woman, and he kept bumping her car. She was scared, but she did get his license plate number. Now, his license plate, it was registered to him, Arthur Bomar, but the car was registered to Maria Cabuenos. So they assumed that he had killed her, but it was never entirely proven. He did go to court for Amy Willard's death, and he flipped off the mother and told her to go, excuse my French, fuck herself and her 2 kids, which is just lovely. He's still on death row, he's still in jail, and he's a pig, and God bless that he's in jail. You know, you're going to be cocky on top of everything else. It's disgusting. Disgusting. Now, the manner of death, the blunt force trauma, the sexual assault, you know, how Julie was found with no pants on. This is what led them to speculate, because he actually, oddly enough, now this happened in 1996 with Amy Willard. In 1992, Julie Barnkyock was at Doylestown Hospital. Arthur Bomar worked there as an orderly. Gloria Barnkyock was wondering, perhaps, you know, even though this was before his reign of terror, maybe he did see Julie in the hospital. And it's a long shot, but the manner of death was so similar. And the detectives did say, like, we have absolutely no physical evidence that Arthur had done this, but nothing's out of the question. And that is peculiar that he did work in a place where she was the patient, and then this happened a year later. So while it's possible, I'm not a big fan of the Arthur Bomar theory, only because I mean, I know that he worked in the hospital, and the family is trying what they can to, you know, they want closure. They want to find out who did this. But he was doing this in 96, and I don't know. I mean, did he see Amy? I mean, that is such a chance happening that, okay, a year earlier, he was working at the hospital where she was at. They don't even know if they crossed paths there. And then how is she going to know that she was at the train station that night unless it was another chance encounter? I don't think he was stalking her. I question the Arthur Bomar. I don't know. Now, this Scott Hutchins was another person of interest. Now, he had a history of stabbing women, and one of them happened to be at the Lansdale's train station. He attacked a woman out of nowhere. He destroyed her life. And it was a frigid evening in January 1994. That is weird because, okay, this happened in January 1994, and the murder of Julie Barnkyock happened in November of 1993. You know, okay, there was a girl. She was just at a train station. Her name was Karen McKinney. Scott Hutchins grabbed a kitchen knife from the Walnut Street Tavern, which was near the station. He attacked this woman and just kept stabbing her repeatedly. He did this to 2 women. They don't mention the name of the other woman. Hutchins was already serving 4 years in jail for attacking and robbing another woman at a Fort Washington train station. The woman managed to break free and run to her car. So these 2 attacks, one was at Fort Washington, one was at Lansdale, which is not too far from each other. So this guy was obviously a nutcase, and he was attacking people at train stations with knives. So, some investigators believe Hutchins might have done it. But again, there's the question of, now it happened here before. It was at the train station. I mean, it is possible. I would think Hutchins before Arthur Bomar. Now, the one thing that really sticks in my head is this guy, Brian Todd. Now, this was supposed to be her friend. Now, he was at South Street. That's where she visited him. She had taken the train home, and people saw her on the train. Investigators went to the train station and were asking around. And they said she had been talking to a white male. So, which leads me to believe that, I would think that this white male was probably the one that probably killed her. I don't know. It just sounds kind of weird. Now, did Brian Todd? I don't know. They don't really go into the relationship enough. Did she reject him in some way? They said she was such a good person, but she was a little naive. Did she? In my mind, I think, honestly, if it would be any of the three, I would. I don't think Arthur Bomar. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's not. Plus, it was a white male that she was talking to. Not that was the killer, but still, I'm trying to go by the totality of the evidence. It's not always the most popular decision. You have to go by what the evidence says. I don't know. I just think, in my mind, I think it was an unknown assailant. None of the three. I think she was a nice girl. She sounded like she would talk to, anybody who asked her something. Somebody might have came up to her, asked her a question, even perhaps said, "Oh, can you come here for a minute?" Why she sounded nervous on the phone, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe the guy saw her at the train station, was kind of waving to her, or "I need to talk to you." Got her off the phone quickly and then said, I really need your help. Can you come with me? And then she said, "Okay, while I'm waiting for my dad, might as well." Followed him, and that's when what happened. That, to me, seems like it makes the most sense. I don't know. And I'm just trying to go through the scene. I just can't. The Arthur Bomar, it's a great theory, but yet it doesn't connect somehow. The Scott Hutchins, now he seemed to be a knife attacker, and she was killed with blunt force trauma, but he could have beat her with the butt of a knife. They said the investigators really thought it was Scott Hutchins. It was never proven. And then others, the mom thought it was Brian Todd, because Brian Todd, which this is very strange, he called her one day and said, "Did you check the train yard? Because a lot of bodies are found in train yards." Which the mom said just immediately perked up, made her skin crawl. That is bizarre. That's weird. So the Brian Todd connection to me seems the most relevant, if anything. But we won't know, because it's so much time has gone by, and they were never able to get much evidence because she was found so much later. That, this 3.5 weeks that went by, it was cold. Not too much of the evidence was preserved. They don't have anything. They said they would never give up on this case. Even when I read newspapers from back then, the investigators, these cases drive people crazy. Now, in Philadelphia, there's so many homicides. And there's the no snitching, there's little plaques they have that with a knife stabbing a rat, sometimes on street corner poles. And I don't see them much in Philadelphia as I see them a lot more in like California, but they're there, and it's an unknown spoken rule anyway. A lot of things get away with because there's so many homicides in Philadelphia that there's a lot of unsolved homicides, specifically due to the fact that people are not supposed to snitch, or if I lived in a neighborhood, where I wouldn't snitch either. I do not blame them. I don't. I'm sorry. I understand. But in Lansdale and places like that, even where I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, I mean, people pretty much cooperated and would give more indication of what happened. So this is out of the ordinary, because they said even back then when they were investigating this, they talked to a lot of people, and it just seemed like there was no answers. So this is a sad case. She seemed like a beautiful person. Julie Barnkyock was a sweet young girl who had her whole life ahead of her, and her parents not only never got closure, but they never had the joy of seeing. She had 2 younger sisters. I'm praying and hoping that their lives went lovely and they were able to do the things that Julie couldn't, but I'm sure that they missed their sister and wish that they could have seen her do the same things that they've done. My brain can't go there because I can't think about that, but I couldn't. I just, it sucks because you can't get past something like that. I don't believe so. I mean, you have to live your life and you have to be as happy as you can, but I don't understand why crap like that happens. Now, there's not much out there for Julie Barnkyock as far as information. So that was for Julie Barnkyock and her family. That is truly a very scary story. I will say, in taking away and getting into a little bit of a breather from that, a few of the cases to wet your whistle. There's the Keisha Jones case. That is next. Was it murder or was it an accident? And after that is the Philip Taylor Kramer case. He was an Iron Butterfly. So who's the magnificent male? Lyndon. Murder at Bedtime with Lyndon. Very frightening. He is good. Go check that out. It is on podcasts everywhere. He's on YouTube. Murder at Bedtime with Lyndon. And I'll give a shout out. Grizzly Books, always phenomenal. One of my favorite podcasts. Check out Marissa Bones with True Crime Bones. DM me, Shopaholic Deb 44, because I'm a shopaholic, and boy am I ever. Boy, is Christmas coming up. I am shopping my brains out. Or therightshoepodcast.com. Therightshoepodcast.com has all the pictures correlating with the show. I did Mayhem with the interview with Attila Chihara, and I also have his website linked, and he's talking about this poppy liqueur. He should make that. I'm telling you, I had more people ask me about that poppy liqueur than anything else. He should really think about making that. My friend Anthony told me that in America they wash the poppy because of the opiate. I don't know if they do it in the other countries. I'll tell you what, he should make that poppy juice because it sounds fantastic. Say, in it, we score. I love it. This is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Show. There was nothing wrong with your headphones, and there was nothing wrong with my taping. It was literally me playing around with all the effects that you can do. That was me saying, you're listening to The Right Shoe backwards. Also, I had to add this because this is the addendum that I'm putting in because I got clobbered for something I said in the Mayhem episode. I forgot to mention this in the beginning. I did not realize excuse my language, the shitstorm that would follow oh boy, things look funny in the dark, don't they? Okay, I did not realize, when I did the Mayhem story, I said, now, I was watching this movie with Necro Butcher in it from Mayhem, and he stated that he feels that, like, if Messiah or Maniac, I believe he did say Maniac, if Maniac would have stayed in the band and none of that stuff with Dead or, Varg had happened with Euronymous, that they would have been as big as Slayer. So I said, was Slayer big? Now, oh my God, forgive me because I really got whipped. I mean, people were pissed or just confused. Like, they were like, Deb, what? You know, we were with you at that time. How did you not remember how big Slayer was? At that time in my life, I was a huge punk rock fan when I was younger, say 15. We're talking punk rock days, which punk rock didn't have a very long, it came and it kind of burned out real quick at that time. Now it's had its resurgences. I'm getting behind myself as usual. I'm trying to explain why I was like into Susie and the Banshees and Public Image Limited, the Sex Pistols, the Slits. Oh my God, there's so many. The Dead Milkmen. There was I was obsessed with all of those groups. So I was really into that punk rock scene. And then I got a boyfriend. He became my everything. And I think that I wasn't aware. I just remember sitting in the playground and massive amounts of rap music. That's what I remember. I don't remember, but people were really freaking out on me. So I such a cutie pie. Are you protecting me? Go ahead, go get him. So I don't think I'm going to be able to calm him down anytime soon. He gets very upset. Good boy. Good boy. So, you know, the point is that I knew who Slayer was. I heard of them. But yes, this is very true. I really did not realize how big they were. And they were probably phenomenally big. And I was completely clueless because I'm telling you, at that time, I was just all about, you know, when you're 16, what are you thinking of? You're thinking of you and your boyfriend and what's going on Friday night. I had to mention that. Also, I'm mentioning that I do have a YouTube channel that I put up. It's always been there, always, for years and years. I mean, I just forget. I put so much stuff up, I forget. This podcast just seems to be working out very well. So this is what I'm into right now. But it's City Sisters and City and then Sistaz. It's me and my sister, and somebody had found it and commented. Well, actually, it was Lyndon. The Murder at Bedtime with Lyndon. He said, oh my God, that, you know, he thought it was funny and he suggested some things. So I told my sister, get over here and let's get some videos going again, because I think that people thought they were funny, and there's other real old ones going through books, and you'll see. I've always had something going on forever since I've been a kid. And not with the internet, but I've always been involved. I always wrote. I've always been there, folks. Check out all that stuff. And when we put up a new video, I will announce it more urgently or whatever. But I had to say that about Mayhem. Okay, so this is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Show.